Cheech with fly fish food. I'm hiding behind Marabou, kind of like you guys do when you don't want to use it. I'm going to show you some really cool techniques that maybe you haven't thought of.
Dude, that's a big brown.
Today, we're going to be playing with Marabou. So this is a cool way that you can do a multicolored tail out of Marabou, where it's not just one color stacked on the next. It's all modeled together. You can do this with several pieces of Marabou. Just know that the more Marabou you put in there, the more difficult it is. I chose some very visually pleasing colors. Pastels, if you will. As you can see, I have found some pieces of Marabou with relatively thin stems that are relatively consistent outside edges with lots of little fuzzy flyers like that. And I'm going to tie these in tip first. So that's about what I want it to look like. See, I found this one. See how it's all twisted like that? No big deal. Okay? So we're just going to tie it in anyway. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to take the tip and we're going to take this out like this and moisten your fingers and create a little tie-in point. Okay? So we'll tie that in like that. Okay? Now I'm going to take the other piece and prep it the same way. And this is kind of the trickiest part, is getting these tied in without them getting all mangled together. There we go. We'll just do the best we can. All right, so tie it in. We'll get rid of those tips. You can leave them in if you want. Now, I've seen people do this a whole bunch of different ways, everywhere from like wetting them and making sure every fiber lands exactly where you want it to go. But rest assured, this is going to look super, super ugly at first. But by the end, it's going to look like we know what we're doing, okay? So that's the rule. Don't judge the process, okay? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab those two feathers, okay? And you can kind of try to get them right. I'm going to pick out, the feathers on one side or the other, but they're just going to kind of go wherever they go anyway. That sounded like Homer Simpson said that. They're just going to go wherever they go anyway. All right, so here's what I'm going to do. I'm just going to start wrapping those as close as you can, like right in front of the previous wrap. And right about here, everything starts to bind down, okay? If you want, you can take your little comb and you can brush that out every time. But don't worry about that. The other thing is we're trying to make a tail, but as you can see, I keep wrapping further and further up the body. And that's also just fine, okay? So I'm just going to keep going with these ugly wraps all the way forward. You can see I'm not taking any time to try to release fibers or anything, and then just kind of judge to see how full it is. And there you go, about like that, okay? So I'm going to trap those fibers down. See how tight that's 1/2 wrap, okay? And that's tied in. Your thread tension should always be good. I'm wiggling my thread through the Marabou to try to trap down as few fibers as possible. And then I'm going to come in here with my scissors and just try to cut nothing but that stem. So I cut the green one. Wow, my thread tension's so tight there I couldn't even pull any of them out. There you go. So those are out of there. And we have this big old ball of Marabou. First thing I do is I'm going to pull that back and just wrap over those last few wraps to make sure you're all tied in. And now comes in the old mustache comb. Something Brigham probably has but will never need. You're going to brush it out, and we're brushing it the opposite way. What that does is it forces all those fibers that were maybe the cowlick part of this hairdo, we're forcing them into the game, So once we have that, we're going to brush it back now, okay? So here we go. I'm going to pull these fibers up, and now we're going to form our tail, okay? Pull them up like that, and then just wrap back over the top of all of these, about to right there. So little bit of bulk. It's not too bad, but look how cool that tail looks, all right? So if you're into the multicolored tails and putting more time into your flies than you really need to catch fish, this is a great technique for you. Okay, what we're going to do now is we're going to palmer a collar onto this, okay? So you saw how much room we used on the back of this fly. I just threw some, polar chenille type thing. Let me get rid of this hater. That one can go, and this one can go. All right, so we're going to make a collar on this with the same color Marabou, and it can be a little bit trickier because we just have less room to work with, and we need to make a nice clean head. It's hard to do. Typically, I'll put something on front of it, but I'll show you the best way to keep it minimal without having to put it in a dubbing loop. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the same type of feather. This feather is a very thin feather. I've plucked off some of the stuff on the bottom, and it's a nice consistent feather. I'm going to find the tip. I'm going to moisten that and tie that in. And this is a nice flat one. For the collar, like on the back one I used kind of a twisted green feather. I might want to find a perfectly straight one for this collar because I have a lot less room to work with. Alright, so we'll throw in that second piece. Just lay that right over the top. If you have any wax or Cheeto residue or anything sticky on your fingers, it's a good time to get that off of there because this stuff will stick to everything. Okay, so we're going to take both of these Marabou feathers and start wrapping those. And as you can see, I laid them really nicely on top of each other. And again, because it's a collar, I'm going to maybe pay attention a little bit more to where my Marabou's laying down. If it gets too bound, I'll come in there with the comb, like right here. Maybe tease it out a little bit. And then you can kind of wrap on top of itself a little bit, but I'm going to go about to right there. Okay, play it by ear. Every piece of Marabou is so different. You can't say like 3 turns and that's it. You never know. So what I did is I kind of wiggled my thread to find a spot where I could tie it down without lashing down a bunch of materials. That's 2 turns. Now I'm going to take everything and fold that back and do several turns right here in front. Okay, now that I have that done, I can find just the stem. Let's see, I got the stem of that one and just the stem of the purple one, or whatever color you want to call that. So we did pretty good. I'm going to throw a whip finish in here, and then we will, okay, hold on, we got some mega haters. Okay, let me get a whip finish in here, and then we will give it a comb job. We'll do its hair. All right, so once we have it like that, again, we're going to brush it forward and now back. And there you've got a cool little Marabou collar. Now again, depending on how far you wrap that forward, you might need to wrap that head a little bit further back. If you do that, you can always like put eye stub on the front, little bruiser blend, or like rabbit in a split dubbing loop. But anyway, that is a really cool way to make a dual colored palmered Marabou collar. Dude, that fly turned out sick. All right, I am going to show you how I would prep this feather if I were going to tie it in by using the sides of the Marabou. Okay, so as you can see on this feather, this side's a little bit shorter than this side. This is longer, shorter. Okay, so if we want to use this whole feather, we got to get those lined up somehow. So here's how I like to do it. I'm just going to take that feather and I'm going to grab that with my thumb and forefinger, and that's basically my Swiss clamp, but it's just a vernal clamp. It's a lot less fancy and usually has some cuts in it. Anyway, then I'm going to grab this part of the feather, grabbing the stem, and I'm going to pull all those feathers right off of there. Okay. Now, without letting go of those quite yet, I'm just going to open that up and I'm going to put this feather in the same length as that one, so about right there. Okay, and I can grab it with my fingers a little bit better. But now those are relatively lined up. We have the butts of one clump about about right here, and then the other clump right there. So at this point, I'm just going to grab all those together, pinch them down, and I'm going to just cut it as long as possible, which is right at the end of that second clump that I tied in, okay? So here we've got a giant clump of marabou from one piece of marabou. And if you want to tie this in so that the whole thing's there and you don't have a big bump, what you can do now is kind of roll it in your fingers, okay? And I'm going to take my thumbnail and I'm going to roll it in my fingers, okay? I'm going to take my thumbnail. Well, first of all, I've been playing with that a lot, so I'm going to just flush it up a little bit. So we'll just flush it up right there, and then just pinch those marabou fibers out of there. And what that does is it creates a really, really tight tie down. This is like marabou dubbing, if you will. Maybe we should do something on that. Anyway, when you tie this down, it ties down almost to nothing on that edge, okay? So that is the way that you can farm off all the usable marabou off of one feather and make sure that everything is the same length to tie it in for your streamer tail.